Hello, my name's Andrew Sylvia. I'm the assistant editor of Manchester Inklink. Today we have a Q&A with mayoral candidate Rich Girard. Following the format we've used for our previous debates, we will be giving Rich 60 minutes to answer questions submitted by our readers. And Rich, welcome to our Q&A here.
Andy, thank you for having me.
Okay.
I'll say at the outset, I wish it were a debate with my fellow candidates for mayor, but I'm looking forward to the interview.
Okay. And on that note, any candidate running for office this fall, if you are looking to have a debate, even if it's just a one-person debate like we're having today, please email me at andy@manchesterinklink.com. We want to make sure we have as many of these debates as possible before Election Day. And if anyone else has further questions they'd like to ask the candidates, please submit them at manchesterinklink.com/2021 candidate debates.
Now, what you just said there about a one-person debate reminded me of something that former Mayor Bob Shaw said once upon a time. It's too late to agree with me. I've already changed my mind. So I don't expect that's going to be happening here today, but, Bob was a good one for a turn of a phrase.
Gotcha. So our format today, again, like I said, we're going to be giving Rich the time, and we have 5 categories that he'll be answering questions from our readers. Housing and homelessness, public safety, education, infrastructure and business, and other. So I will ask Rich, in their first category, housing and homelessness, we have 17 questions from our readers so far. Please pick a number from 1 to 17.
Oh, I'll pick sweet 16.
Oh, 16. Okay, your clock starts now. Bunny from Ward 11 asks, how do you plan to support these initiatives proposed by our Director of Homeless Initiatives?
How do I plan to support the initiatives proposed by the Director of Homelessness?
Homeless Initiatives, Shauna Green.
Right.
I apologize.
Well, to be perfectly candid with you, there hasn't been a whole lot that I have seen from her that I am interested in supporting. I think one of the things that Manchester has been in this whole debacle that has been the homeless problem is all carrot and no stick. The city has been way too permissive with the people on the streets. And what folks need to understand is that our homeless problem really isn't about a lack of affordable housing. It's about people who are mentally ill or drug addicted who are on our streets. And part of the problem, Bunny, is that according to information the city has released, 3 out of 4 homeless people on our streets are not from our city. We've been in the import business, and 2 of the drivers that are bringing people here, or 2 of the magnets that are bringing people here, is Safe Station and all of these illegally operating sober businesses in residential neighborhoods throughout the city. And the numbers on Safe Station have ranged, but generally speaking, somewhere around 60% of all of the people who've gone through Manchester Safe Station are not from Manchester. A significant percentage of them aren't even from New Hampshire. And so Safe Station, while a great idea at the time in reaction to what was happening initially with the opioid crisis, has had the unintended consequence of drawing people who are drug addicted to our city, and what has followed them are people who deal drugs and the crime that comes with dealers and drug users together in large numbers in the city. This has led to homelessness. A lot of folks try to justify the existence of these illegally operating sober recovery facilities in the city. And according to published news reports, more than 60 of them are operating in our city. And I have firsthand experience with those because 2 of them opened up in my neighborhood, one across the street and one literally around the corner. So I have a feeling for how these things operate and what happens in residential neighborhoods when these illegitimate operators come into our neighborhoods, not the least of which is a significant percentage, and on average from the documents we've seen, about 2 out of 3 of these folks, again, aren't from our city. So the upshot of this is when these folks relapse or they get into trouble or they otherwise get tossed out of the recovery housing, or they end up on our streets because they have nowhere to go when they come to Manchester for Safe Station, is what you see on our streets, in our parks, on our trails, and other places, on the outskirts of residential neighborhoods and some of our forested areas. and it's really hurt. So my approach to this is to shut off the magnets. It's time we wind down and terminate Safe Station. Most people don't know that the state of New Hampshire operates a program called the Doorway. The Doorway provides the same services that Safe Station does, only it provides it in 9 different locations around the entire state of New Hampshire. Now, Manchester has one of those so-called hubs, and it's at Catholic Medical Center. Everybody knows about Safe Station, but nobody knows about Doorways. And one of the ways that we can bring attention to the Doorway program is to say, Safe Station is done. We're now going to work with the state-funded, state-provided, state-operated Doorway program here in Manchester and help the state promote the other 8 locations around our state so that people aren't coming from everywhere to Manchester. The second thing I will do is crack down on these illegally operating sober facilities. Manchester has 16 different zoning districts. In 8 of those districts, these sober facilities can operate by right or with permission from the planning board. It's called a conditional use permit. So we have half the city zones in our city, half the zones in our city where these things can operate legally, and we have many of them that do. And the difference between the ones that operate legally and the ones that don't is the one that operate legally, they play by the rules. They work with the city. They conform to the codes, and the ones that operate illegally don't. So you have to ask yourself, who's better served? The ones that don't operate legally or the ones that do operate legally? Who takes better care of their clients? I think that's a no-brainer. And so if we start to wind down and shut down those magnets and make Manchester an unattractive place for folks with these issues to come and to congregate and to gather and develop the critical mass that we've seen here in our city, then we will be better able to deal with the population that is native to our city, because we have the services and the infrastructure that can handle the number of people from our city and even some of the surrounding towns, but certainly not the volume that we've seen imported from all over everywhere to be here. The other thing that I think we need to do is add police to our outreach teams. The only thing the outreach teams have really been successful in doing, by and large, is getting these folks on the streets signed up for any variety of welfare benefits through the state. So we're now, as taxpayers, funding them to be there because they've been enrolled in all sorts of state-provided welfare programs. Other than that, getting them into treatment for their mental illness or their drug addiction, helping them into recovery, getting them into shelters, it's been a profound failure because once they turn down the help, the city more or less goes, and walks away. And they keep coming back, and they keep coming back. And there is no consequence to them for violating all of the state laws and city ordinances that they routinely violate by their presence, whether it's pitching a tent or doing any of the unspeakable, I'll just leave it that way, things that they do. Being homeless is not a crime, but being homeless should not absolve these folks of the crimes that they commit, especially when the crimes that they commit would come with penalties for any other citizen. So I would add police officers to our outreach teams to inform those folks of the various violations of ordinances and laws that they will now be enforcing if they don't accept the help, right? So the idea is you don't have to take the help, but that doesn't mean we have to let you stay here where you are, in this park, in this doorway, on this trail, on this private property, wherever it is, in violation of law. And we're going to start to enforce that now as a way of sending the message either you need to get the help that's being offered to you or you need to move along because you just can't stay here and do what you're doing anymore. So that's how I would handle the homeless vagrancy problem that we have here in the city.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Moving forward to the next category, public safety. We have 15 questions from our readers. Please pick a number from 1 to 15.
Oh, 15. Lucky 7.
Okay, 15 it is. Robert from Ward 2 asks, do you feel that the police department is transparent? What about the fire department?
Well, I guess that's a subject for discussion. I am not a fan of the fact that the police department shut down the scanners so that people can't listen to the scanners the way they used to. I suppose I understand the argument that was made to do that, but I'm not sure that entirely blocks out the public's right to know. I think there's a lot, and I can say this from my time on the radio, that happens behind closed doors in the police department that should not happen. It's hard to get around that, though. The right to know law here in our state is not a terribly powerful tool. It can be used, but there are exceptions to it. And we're seeing one of these play out right now involving Alderman Levasseur with this, this bogus charge that was made against him as somebody who verbally assaulted a city employee over a parking ticket that he got. Fortunately, several buses from the Manchester Transit Authority had cameras that captured the alleged event, and clearly there was no yelling, screaming, running, waving of hands. There was clearly no issue. And the police department conducted an investigation of Alderman Levasseur without even telling Alderman Levasseur he was being investigated. They called to give him the results of the investigation. And so the report didn't include anything that he said or would have said in response to the allegations. He has been trying to get the body camera interview of the person who filed the complaint, but the police department is hiding behind the right to know law, saying that they don't have to release it because there's an exemption. It will be violating her privacy, the person who made the complaint, by releasing the videotape, which I find to be odd. You have a public employee who is publicly accused, an elected official, and they're saying there's a privacy issue, so they won't release the body camera footage. So he's in court to try to overturn that. But I think there are incidents like that in our police department that certainly raise an eyebrow or two and a few more questions. And I'm not entirely sure that wasn't a political hit against Alderman Levasseur, and it concerns me. I think a lot of those questions would be put to rest if they would simply release the body camera video footage. And if they used body camera video to record that interview intentionally, rather than using recording devices that are in many of the interview rooms at the police department, that smacks to me as an intentional act and should be dealt with. So it's hard to answer a general question about transparency, but there are specific incidents like that one that are a great cause of concern.
Okay, thank you so much. We move on to the next category, education. We have 19 questions from our readers here. Please pick a number from 1 to 19.
Number 3.
Number 3. Okay. Chris Martin from Ward 7 asks, education is the key to success in society. How will you support public education in Manchester?
Well, I have a plan that would fundamentally change the public education system in Manchester. It's a public school choice program. I think what we need to recognize here in the city of Manchester, and it's something that public schools, generally speaking, need to recognize, and that is people do have choices, okay? Certainly wealthier folks have always had choices, the ability to both pay their property taxes and send their kids to a private school. Charter schools started to make inroads with less wealthy socioeconomic demographics, and those charter schools have been extremely popular. Right now in the city of Manchester, there are roughly 3,500 kids who could attend Manchester's public schools that are either being homeschooled, going to a public charter school, going to a Catholic school, or going to some other private school. So choice is already in the Manchester School District, and if you're wondering, that's about 25% of the eligible school-age population in our city choosing something other than the public schools. Now that the state has passed the education freedom accounts, something that I actually do support, I expect you will see more and more families, as space is available in alternative schools, choosing to leave the Manchester public schools. Now, I don't think it's a good thing that they're choosing to leave the Manchester public school system, but I do think it's a good thing that they're finding educational options that better suit the needs of their children. So the question becomes, how can the city of Manchester compensate for that? I served 4 years on the school board, so I have a pretty decent understanding of how the bureaucracy and the unions work. And my personal opinion is the well-being of students and their education is not being represented by either the bureaucracy or the unions. And so we need to change that. And the way you change that is not to have a superintendent in a school board start deciding that certain schools are going to have certain magnet programs, or maybe they'll start a charter school, or maybe they'll spend $500 million in a foolish attempt to say that the quality of our buildings dictates the quality of our education. No, the way you do this is you empower the people in the buildings, and we have some great people in our buildings, our teachers, principals, paraprofessionals, whoever. You empower them to create options that the district otherwise wouldn't be able to create. And before I go on, there are a couple stats that you need to know. Right now, according to the school district's own test scores, we use a system called iReady. In grades 1 through 8, only 15% of our kids are on grade level in math, and only 22% are on grade level in reading. That is a catastrophe. So the idea that our schools are doing a great job is not really borne out by the statistics. And you can put as much lipstick as you want on this pig, as they did back in June when they presented these numbers. It's still a pig, and to ignore that has definite consequences for the children in the system. So I don't blame parents looking for alternatives because the system clearly is failing kids on a broad scale. Those numbers point to no other conclusion or reality. So that is our starting point. Now, if you believe, as I do, that we have quality educators in our buildings who have their own interests, their own passions, their own skill sets, and you give them the opportunity to create an educational option that will be of service to the types of students that they believe they can best serve, then suddenly you start creating options. Because while I don't believe the Manchester School District is a 21 school entity with thousands of employees and the school board that it has, while I don't believe it can compete with the individual private and public charter school options that are sucking so many kids out of the district, I do believe that our individual schools can compete on a school-to-school basis if we create the environment where they can create options, and then we give parents the opportunity to choose those options, right? So if you live near the Smith Road School, but Parker Varney, which has a unique program in our city, but it's only available to people who live in the Parker Varney Attendance District, which not everybody in the Parker Varney Attendance District loves or wants for their kid. But if you live near Smith Road and you like what Parker Varney is doing, in my opinion, you should be able to bring your child to to Parker Varney Elementary School. Now, in order for a system like that to work, you have to provide options, or I should say incentives and rewards for teachers to create, okay? So in my system, money follows the child. What does that mean? That means if you live near Smith Road, but your child goes to Parker Varney, the school district will pay Parker Varney for the attendance of your child in their school. So now the school itself becomes a self-contained cost center that has its own income and will have its own expenses, right? So now if my child's at Parker Varney, that means that Parker Varney created something that my child needed or wanted, or that I as a parent thought my child would benefit by. And in order to keep my child there, they have to show progress. They have to be responsive to the parent, because if they're not showing progress, if the child isn't improving or the child isn't thriving, or the parent is unhappy with how things are being handled, the parent can, look around and say, you know what, I think Wilson School will be a better fit, and they can move their child to Wilson School, and then the money will leave Parker Varney and go to Wilson. You see how this works? So it's kind of the way the private sector education market works, where there's an incentive to create options that attract certain types of students and serve those students. And when you do that well, you get paid. And when you don't do that well, you don't get paid. And so we need to do something like that. But there's another piece to this that I think people need to look at, because it's not enough, in my opinion, to just simply give people at the building level the opportunity to create, although I've spoken with many teachers who are very excited about the possibility of being able to develop, take ownership in, and have say in the educational program in the building that they're part of. That's very exciting to the good teachers, okay? The ones that have a passion, a strength, an interest, know that if they did A, students would react to it and benefit by it, okay? But under New Hampshire law, which most people don't, most people think in New Hampshire only the State Board of Education can charter public schools, or create public charter schools. That's not the case. Local school boards can do this too, and I mentioned this in my plan, which you can see at girardformayor.com. But under New Hampshire law, 2 certified New Hampshire teachers, 10 parents, a college or university, a business, or a nonprofit organization can petition a local school board to create a local chartered school, a locally chartered school. I think that's phenomenal. So a couple of examples come to mind, right? The Boys and Girls Club, for example, does a lot with education and helping kids in our school district. What if the Boys and Girls Club petitioned the school board and said, look, we would like to create a public charter school here in Manchester that served kids in need of this approach? Well, we just created another Manchester public school. That's exciting. What if West and Catholic Medical Center wanted to partner on creating some sort of a life sciences program where they could work together and attract kids to West High School that were interested in going into the medical field? And they had this partnership with Catholic Medical Center, which is just a couple blocks away from West High School. So when you start to open up possibilities like that, and you bring it down to the building level, and you allow the community to get involved in that way, you start to really create organically options that I don't think otherwise would exist. Now, where there are options, there are choices. Where there are choices, there are engaged parents and other people who now have decisions to make because they have reason to make the decision. And so I think it starts to engage parents in a way that they have not been engaged. I think it starts to engage the community in a way it has not been engaged. I think the creation of those options are going to provide exciting things for families to choose from. And I think all of this will elevate the quality of instruction here in Manchester, which clearly by the test scores, which have been sagging for many years now, especially since we converted to the Common Core back in 2013. They have been sagging for many years. They've hit, you can't really get much lower than 15 and 22%. And I think the only way you're going to improve that is to unleash the talents of the people in the building and in the community to provide options that better serve kids. They provide options that families are looking for and that our kids deserve. And I'll just leave it with this. Quality comes from competition. And, the school board and the district at that point become supportive of the individual schools and their efforts rather than, the command and control system we have now telling them what they have to do and how they have to do it. And it puts them in partnership with the buildings. And the job of the school board at that point, in my opinion, becomes making sure that the tools that are used to assess the academic progress of the kids in our Manchester schools are able to compare what's happening at Parker Varney with what's happening at Smith Road, with what's happening at Wilson or anywhere else. And I think at that point, because that provides parents with information about the success of those programs in the buildings. So that's the direction I see things moving in. And if we don't move in that direction and we insist on a command and control district-run system where everything has got to be done a certain way and the district authorities are dictating terms and the schools are having to do what they're told, we are going to continue, especially with the education freedom accounts and more scholarship opportunities that are giving low and moderate income families the ability to make choices other than their local public school, then we're going to continue to see the hemorrhaging of students out of our system, and that's not good for anybody. So ultimately, my plan is designed to create options that I believe will be powerful enough to attract kids back into the system.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the infrastructure and business section. We have 17 questions here from our readers. Please pick a number from 1 to 17.
5.
5. Okay. I believe this question was asked last night at our Aldermanic at Large debate. You can check that out on manchesterinklink.com. Rochelle from Ward 10 asks, what is your opinion on the current climate for downtown business, and how can you make it better?
Well, one thing that's not helping the current climate for downtown business is the homeless vagrancy problem, and I won't address that again. But clearly, the city has not been responsive to the needs of the downtown business owners. That homeless vagrancy, and I've heard this over and over and over again from people who have moved their offices out of town or out of the downtown and out of the city altogether. In fact, if you go to the my plan to reduce crime and protect neighborhoods, I actually cite an example of somebody who not only moved his business out of town because he get tired of people peeing inside of the lobby of his building and the god-awful smell and other things that made it unpalatable for his clients to come to him. He actually moved his family out of the city because he couldn't take it anymore. The things that are happening here. So I think the way we need to revamp the climate downtown is to first tackle this homeless vagrancy problem. There are some good things happening downtown. I'm happy to see the increase in housing, but that too is threatened by the general environment. One of the things that I believe we really need to do downtown. There are two other things. One of the things I really believe we need to do downtown is we need to take a long, hard look at our building codes and make them user-friendly for buildings that were built in an era long time ago. We can bring those buildings up to a more modern standard of safety without making pretend they were built in 2021, with so many of them having been built 100 years ago or longer. And I think the way the codes are enforced are a problem too. Talk to any property owner or business owner downtown, I should say almost any, and you will get nightmare after nightmare after nightmare story about how difficult the city was to do business with. And that's not good for us. Those upper floors were always questionable. Upper floors in the buildings downtown were always questionable as housing. They have been for the 30 years that I've been involved in city government. But now after COVID and all of that, with more people working from home, I think now is really the time to strike and make it more simple and easy to convert those upper floors to residential spaces for those property owners that want to do it, and do it in a way that's economically feasible, because the way the city goes about things now, it's simply not. And I think the more people who live downtown, generally speaking, the more viable and vibrant the downtown's going to be. The other thing that we need to do, and this is not just something for downtown, it's something for the entire city. It really disturbs me to see the broken trees, the dead trees, the weeds that are taller than my 9 and 10-year-old kids, the trash, the dirt, the things like that. I'm of the opinion that particularly in the downtown core, where we have a special central business service district tax that's levied per linear square foot on all of the properties within the district, I have always been of the opinion that more of that money needs to be spent on making downtown look better. Okay, I think it's a bad idea when you replace a broken brick with asphalt. That looks awful. I think it's a bad idea when you leave dead and broken trees hanging around. I think it's a bad idea to not have the weeds pulled out of the sidewalks and out of the curbing, and not have the, Canal Street. You take a look at how Canal Street was built, right? That was supposed to be a nice sort of promenade street. I don't remember ever in my lifetime, and I've lived in Manchester for nearly 52 years now, ever seeing anybody do anything to maintain those, those medians. Nothing. Granite Street, all those planter beds or whatnot. You can't tell what's weed, what's flower. It just looks awful. And I think there's a lot to be said for having a sort of manicured look, and I would focus resources to do that, because the truth of the matter is places that look like they give a damn about how they appear to others have lower crime, they have higher participation rates among visitors and residents alike, and they're just, generally speaking, more valuable areas. So those are the areas that I would engage downtown.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Moving on to the next category. This is the miscellaneous category. So some interesting questions here. We have 18 questions in this category. Please pick a number from 1 to 18.
Sure. Number 3.
Number 3. Okay. East Side resident from Ward 6 asks, how long have you lived in the city? What are your connections to the city? And how do you understand our culture?
Oh, well, I'm a lifelong resident of the city. In fact, I am a 4th generation resident of the city. So I actually understand Manchester's culture in a number of different ways. First, I grew up on the west side in Ward 12, as a matter of fact. So my early years in the city were growing up on the west side, attending St. Catherine's Church on Webster Street, because that's where my parents, when they were younger, went. My grandparents were actually charter members of that parish, but we eventually went to St. Jean's, as we called it in the day, St. Jean-Baptiste, and now I am a parishioner at St. Marie's, and I have been since 1994. That's where I met my wife and where we got married. So I have a long history on the west side. It's an area of the city that I understand very, very well. I've lived the last 10 years up near Derryfield Park, and so I've been living on the east side for a while. I had grandparents who lived in the north end. My father was Mr. Girard, for those of you who went through South Side before 2001, between 1967 and 2001. That Mr. Girard was my dad. So I've had lots of exposure to the city through where my family's lived, where I've lived, where my parents have worked, and just all of the friends that I have around. What I would say about the culture of the city is this. Manchester is a city of neighborhoods, and there is still pride in those neighborhoods, and there is great concern in those neighborhoods about their general deterioration, as things like the homeless vagrancy problem, our violent crime rate, which is 60% higher than the national average, our property crime rate, which is 12% above the national average, our overall crime rate, which is 20% above the national average for cities. All of these little quality of life things that really make it difficult for people to live are eroding the quality of life in our neighborhoods and making it very, very difficult. So Manchester is a place that, once upon a time, Manchester was named the city that would not die. I believe it was by Time magazine, after the floods of the 1930s washed away what was left of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. And in 1 week during the bankruptcy, in 1 week following the bankruptcy announcement of Amoskeag, this city, back in 1936, I think it was, might have been 38, raised $5 million at the height of the Depression to rescue those assets from the bankruptcy court and take possession of them so that they would not go down the river with those floods, like so many other mill towns in New England did when their mills collapsed. So Manchester, it's tough, it's gritty, it's folks love their neighborhoods. They don't really like being told what to do, but by the same token, they want to help their neighbors. They don't like it when their neighbors abuse them. That's one of the issues that we have with these illegally operating sober living businesses in neighborhoods. They don't like people taking advantage of things, and I think they're generally respectful. So I'd say in a number of ways, our city has got a conservative culture. It still has a lot of ethnic pride. There are still many French Canadian Catholics, Greeks, Polish, a lot of the more established, older, the Irish ethnic groups. But to that, we've added a whole bunch of new ethnic groups that are trying to, stake their claim and establish themselves here. So culturally, when I think of Manchester, I think of its neighborhoods. I think of the differences in the neighborhoods that surround, that come from the people who built them, and how it all comes together in a city where, generally speaking, people get along, as long as you don't start poking them in the eye about who they are, where they are, or what they're doing. If they're keeping to themselves, they're fine. So I think that's how I'll answer that.
Okay. We're past the halfway mark, and we're going back to the first category again. We have 16 more questions available that you can choose from. We're not going to probably get to all of them, but
number
as many
one.
as we can.
We'll just go to number one.
Number one. All right. Kendra A. from Ward 7 asks, what are your thoughts on camp clearing, and what is your solution to this issue? I think she's referring to the homeless camps.
Yeah. Well, I do not favor allowing the camps to continue. That said, if you're in a boat and the boat is taking out water, you can do one of three things. You can let the boat sink, you can start bailing the boat out, or either before you bail out the boat or while you're bailing out the boat, you can stop the leak. You can plug the leak. Okay. So what I see the problem with the camp clearing right now is we haven't plugged the leak. We're closing down the camps, and I'm really not a fan of how the camps are being closed. This whole 10-day eviction process, I don't get. I don't appreciate the fact that the police department, the health department, none of the departments that could be issuing violations of city ordinances or state laws for the behavior that takes place in these camps, becomes an enforcement-free zone once the eviction notice is passed. I think we need to be more quick to move people along, and I definitely think we should be enforcing the ordinances and the laws along the way. But if we don't shut off the magnets, we're just continuing to attract people that are going to collect in camps. So in addition to shutting down the camps, we need to shut down the magnets so we can stop bringing water into the boat while we're bailing the boat out.
Okay. Going back to the public safety category here, we have 14 questions available.
Number one. I'm going to go number one across the board.
Number one across the board for everything else? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Kelly from Ward 3 asks, will you continue uniformed officers' patrols in the downtown area?
Yeah, I just read an article in the Union Leader, about these patrols, and all of a sudden, foot patrols, it almost seemed like a revelation to the police department that foot patrols deter crime. I thought that was sort of common knowledge. It's hard for me as a candidate for mayor to sort of dictate terms as to what the police should do or shouldn't do or how. What I will say, generally speaking, is I think we need a different focus when it comes to fighting crime here in the city of Manchester. The way I look at it is the way Mayor Rudy Giuliani looked at it in New York, right? New York had a horrific violent crime problem when he took office. Crime was completely out of control in that city, and there was no reining it in. But he went after the squeegee men. He went after the prostitutes. He went after the low-level sort of crimes. They went after the quality of life crimes. They started cleaning up these little so-called nuisances, right? And what they found was a tremendous decrease in the amount of crime across the board, including, if not especially, violent crime, which crashed during cratered. It just went straight down. during Giuliani's term as mayor. So I've heard people complain to me that Manchester police, they get called or they're talked to on the street or whatnot, and they say, oh, well, we've got better things to do than take care of X. And it could be the homeless guy that's passed out in the doorway. It could be the graffiti. It could be in my own neighborhood, I've had homeless people come up on my porch. Myself and two neighbors had our houses vandalized, taking political signs and flags off of our property and whatnot. Lots of little things like that they can't be bothered with. Well, I think it's about time we start being bothered with them because it's proven when you pay attention to the little crimes and you put a stop to them, the environment changes. When criminals get the sense that people are watching them and little things are being dealt with, they don't go there. Peoria, Illinois, back in the mid-90s, and I document both what happened in New York and what I'm about to share with you in my plan to reduce crime and protect neighborhoods at girardformayor.com. They went on a sustained, targeted traffic enforcement plan that over a 3-year period of time caused their violent crime rate to plummet because of all of the people that they picked up during their traffic sweeps. So I think that there are quality of life areas, so-called minor crimes, that if we were to focus our efforts on, we would see a dramatic change in the environment here in the city. And like other cities that have taken these paths before us, would see a significant improvement in our environment because of the decrease in crime that follows. So I like walking patrols. I'm not about to, I know there are some candidates out there that, want to tell the police what trails to send the horses down and what, streets they should be walking on. I'll leave that up to them. But, in terms of discussing priorities and how to address things in the direction I think things should go, I think that's the role of a mayor. And that's the direction I want to go in. There should not be the idea that there are some crimes that are too small to pay attention to, because that line always moves in the wrong direction. So we have to take all of these things seriously. And there are plenty of examples around the city, around the country, including the two that I just mentioned, on how we can get that done.
Okay. Going to the education category again, per your request, we're doing question number 1. This question was asked last night as well. Ashley Poulin from Ward 9 asks, do you believe in listening to experts, professionals, academics, and scholars in matters on which you are not well versed? Are you able to remove your ego and focus on the best interest of a well-rounded student body? And what do you think is the most important step for Manchester schools to focus on in the coming year?
Well, I've already explained what I would do with Manchester schools and creating a public school choice program, so that I won't go over that. Here's what I'll say about the experts. Do I believe in listening to them? Of course. But if you paid attention, or I shouldn't put it that way, anybody who paid attention to my time on the school board knows that I was not shy about questioning them or challenging them. I do not defer to somebody just because they say they're an expert. To me, if you're an expert, you should be able to, first of all, talk to me in a language that I understand. Nothing irritates me more than so-called smart people who sit there and use lingo and jargon that the average person, whether they're sitting on a school board or they're watching on TV, as you are right now, Ashley, just doesn't understand. And if you watched me on the school board, you know there were more than a few occasions where I would put my hand up and stop them and say, would you mind putting that in English, please? Leave the lingo aside. Because ultimately, in order for me as an elected official to be comfortable with what the experts are telling me, it has to be put into terms that not only I understand, but terms that the majority of the people who are watching on TV, whose kids are in the schools, who are paying the taxes, that they can understand. That enables a conversation back and forth, which enables understanding to take place. So if the experts can prove to me, if they can provide the data, if they can make the case, if they can tell me what it is they need, we need to be looking at to know whether or not we're headed in the right direction or the wrong direction, well, then, yeah, I'm happy to listen to them. But if what they're saying doesn't make sense to me, then I reserve the right to not follow what the experts are saying. And I have a little saying, it goes something like this: the experts built the Titanic and the amateurs built the Ark. One worked pretty poorly and the other worked pretty well. So sometimes experts abandon common sense, and I think they should be challenged. And if the results that the experts have gotten over their time with the school district don't bear out that we should continue to listen to them, I'm happy to point that out. So there's something to be said for common sense. There's something to be said for practical experience. There's something to be said for my ability as a layperson to question the expert, to see how they respond, to see what information they provide, to know that they're hearing what my question or my concern is, or where my lack of understanding is, and be able to address that. And so nothing made me crazier, to be perfectly honest with you, when I was on the school board than people saying, oh, well, so-and-so is our educational leader, or so-and-so is our expert. We should just do whatever it is they're telling us we need to do. Well, what do you need a school board for if that's your position? So obviously we pay the experts lots of money, but we need to hold the experts accountable to their results, and we need to make sure that the experts are conversing with us in a language that almost anybody and everybody can participate in. So there's my riff on the experts.
Okay. Moving back to the infrastructure and business
and
section.
Not for nothing, by the way. A lot of people who ask that question, and I've seen this, and I'm not necessarily referring to the questioner, but I've seen this over time when people, especially if they are the expert, push back about being the expert. What they're really saying is, you are not qualified to question me. You are not qualified. You don't know what you're talking about. You are not qualified to question me. Who are you to second guess me? And I ran into that as a member of the school board on multiple occasions. And there was one time where my response was, well, these are the results you've gotten over the last several years. Why should I keep listening to you? You just sat there and told me that we changed the program and we should expect the proficiency scores to go down because we got a better program. How does that make sense to me? How does that make sense to you? Explain it to me. Why is that the case? So a lot of people who want us to follow the experts think that we're simply unqualified to make decisions and we should defer to the expert, and that is something I firmly reject.
Okay. All right. Going back to the infrastructure and business section, like you asked, we're doing the first question.
Number one.
Number one.
Yeah.
Rice from Ward 3 asks, what is your opinion on bringing a train station downtown?
That's kind of a loaded question. I don't understand the premise of commuter rail. I really don't. Commuter rail is somehow supposed to attract people who work in the Boston area to come work in Manchester. Well, if you drive north on 93 from Boston to Manchester in the morning, you could fire a cannon on that road and not hit anyone because all of the traffic is going south. So I don't understand how a commuter rail is going to attract people to come work in Manchester because they'd be going opposite the rush hour traffic, both getting here and leaving. So I don't understand the premise. I don't think it's going to cause businesses to leave Massachusetts and come locate here. If anything, I think it's going to cause businesses that would rather be in Massachusetts to go there because now there'll be a commuter rail that can more easily take people south during the rush hour traffic. I think the other things that we need to take a look at here is who's going to pay for this, right? I hear people say all the time, there's a great demand for this. Well, if there's such a great demand for this, why? I mean, the studies that I've seen historically have said that the prices of the tickets to ride these trains are going to have to be heavily subsidized by government in order to hit the price point that people would be willing to buy them to go back and forth. Well, if there's that great a demand, there shouldn't need to be such a heavy subsidy. Okay? So I'm not exactly excited about what I'm seeing there either. So I think there are a lot of questions about the honest viability. What is it going to cost to run the train? Who is going to pay for it? What are the subsidies going to be? And all that. I mean, I've been to Exeter, New Hampshire. I have friends who live in Exeter, New Hampshire. The Amtrak commuter train stops in Exeter, New Hampshire. There ain't anything going on in downtown Exeter that wasn't going on before the train went through there and wouldn't stay there after the train left. So I'm not sure what these things are supposed to bring. And the other real issue I have is they're talking about building this in conjunction with the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the MBTA, which runs, the T in Boston and the Commuter Rail in Massachusetts. That is as corrupt and inept an organization as you will find almost anywhere in government. It's billions of dollars in debt. It's pardon the pun, it's a train wreck. So, I know everyone gets excited over the shiny choo-choo, as I used to call it, when Governor Margaret Wood Hassan would, push for it. But there are a lot of unanswered questions about this. And my own personal opinion is, from what I've seen, I think it's a financial boondoggle that is not going to do anything to attract any new business or any new people into the city of Manchester, except potentially, criminals from Lawrence and Lowell and other people in Boston that might find it easier to take the train than 93 to get up here. But I haven't seen any compelling reason, and the very premise of the argument that it will make it easier for people to commute north when, in the morning, to come to work in Manchester. I'm not seeing it. As someone who's had to make that drive on various occasions for various reasons, I'm not seeing it. So that's that. It's not a hard and fast no, but there's a lot of information there that doesn't make sense to me, and these studies aren't doing anything to put that concern to rest.
Okay. Going back to the other category, Sue from Ward 1 asks, what would you do to make immigrants and BIPOC feel more a part of our community? And as someone who would be seeking a citywide seat, not just one ward, as mayor, what would you do to connect with people from different wards, different backgrounds, and varying concerns?
Well, I've kind of always done that in my everyday life, both as a school board member, as a business person. I've had multiple people of multiple nationalities work for me and with me over the years, whether it was with my radio show or in my financial services business. When I was on the school board, I went anywhere and everywhere I was invited to go, including places where people didn't think I would show up because philosophically or ideologically, I'm, quote, not in line with the mantra of the group. Personally, the way I deal with people is on a one-on-one basis. I really don't care where anybody comes from, what they look like, what they sound like, although sometimes I have a little trouble listening to the accents and making out what's being said. But I think if you're willing to talk to people, if you're willing to learn about them, if you're willing to listen to their experiences and share their own, I think they understand you as an individual and relate to you as an individual. I'm not a big believer in dealing with people as members of a group. While I will go visit with any group, and during this campaign I've been invited to visit with and sit with many, and I've happily done so. I think, we're always best to first look at people as individuals, right? The old story, don't judge a book by its cover, and to learn about people. And sometimes that means I commit microaggressions, because I will ask people where they're from and tell me a little bit about, your culture, your heritage, your background. It's not because I'm being a white supremacist, it's because I don't know how to learn without asking people questions. I work part-time at UPS in addition to my full-time job as an investment advisor. I'm self-employed in that business. And I have 3 kids in college. I have 2 in elementary school. I took a part-time job loading delivery trucks at UPS, which means, by the way, I'm a member of Teamsters Local 633, because they pay for the health insurance. And as a self-employed guy with 3 kids in college, the $40,000 I don't have to spend on premiums and deductibles on health insurance is a big number for me. But I will tell you, at UPS, there are all sorts of folks there. They're immigrants, they're refugees, they're Hispanic, various African nations are represented there, and it's kind of fun getting to know them. I've had 2 or 3 people at that place walk up to me and just start speaking Spanish assuming that I spoke Spanish. And they told me both told me that I looked like I was a Spanish speaker. And I just kind of chuckled over it. I didn't get offended or anything like that. So I guess the way I would do it is accept any invitation that I am given to go speak with people, take every opportunity I can to learn and understand. But I think also the flip side of that is we have an obligation as natives to help them acculturate into our system, to help them understand the institutions and the ways. This is not trampling on their culture. It's helping them adapt to their new place to live so that they understand the norms and can participate more fully. Manchester has got a long and proud history as an ethnic city, and the legacies of those cultures still exist today. But we all need to be able to unite around the idea of the great American melting pot, that all are equal before the law, that opportunity is available for any individual who is willing to do the work and overcome the obstacles. And yes, we all have obstacles to overcome, whether we're native or new, whether we're black or white or anything else. And as I've taught my kids, it's not what happens to you in life that necessarily matters. It's how you respond to what happens to you in life that will determine ultimately whether you succeed or whether you fail. And I think that needs to be our attitude. I think we need to be open to meeting new people. I think we need to treat everybody, individually with dignity and respect. I think we need to all respect the rule of law. And I think we need to stop the name calling for people who want things like border security and want our laws enforced when it comes to immigration. They're not supremacists. They're not, xenophobes. They're not nativists. They're people, and I will tell you, many people that I've met with in immigrant communities who came here legally would also like the legal process followed. So, I think, I think there's a lot of room for dialogue. I think what we really need to do is get to know each other. Yes, we need to learn and understand the cultures that are coming into our society, but we also have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure they understand the culture that is taking them in so that they understand the norms. And this is one thing that former police chief David Mera, I think, did exceptionally well, was his community outreach to new Americans who came from places where the police didn't work the way our police here in the United States work, so they understood the system. They need to understand the system every bit as much as we need to sort of understand where they came from, so we know how to accommodate each other and adjust to what's going on. So that's how I would be welcoming, and that is being willing to visit with, learn from, work with, and also educate in the ways of America those who are new to our country.
Okay. This will probably be our last question. Ron from Ward 5 asks, to paraphrase that guy from a few years ago, the rent is too damn high in Manchester. What will you do to fix it?
Great question. Well, prices are high when supply is scarce. So it's basic supply and demand. My approach to housing is, quite honestly, to stop focusing on trying to spend millions of dollars to construct subsidized low-income housing. Manchester's really awash in it, to be honest. And take a look at the regulatory burdens that we put on those who build housing and the enforcement practices undertaken by those who are there to administer the regulatory codes. So that Manchester becomes an easier place to build in. So the first thing we need to do is get the regulations working in conjunction with the age and condition of our buildings, right? We can make buildings perfectly safe without making pretend we built them in 2021. The other thing that I think we can do to increase the supply of housing is to take a look at the impact that COVID has had. Because COVID has made retail and office space a very anemic market. So I think there are conversion opportunities there that could provide us with some unique housing here in the city. And then I've already mentioned what I would do. I think there needs to be a focus on converting the upper floors of Elm Street. So the short answer to your question is we need to systematically and smartly increase the supply of housing. Let the marketplace provide the housing that people are interested in living in. Because the more housing, whether it's high-end housing or low-end housing, the more housing we build, the more supply there is, the lower prices will be. And not for nothing, we need to keep an eye on taxes. You talk about the rent being too damn high. Well, before I came to do this interview, I was looking at the statistics of the revaluation that was just concluded. And the single biggest increases in property value are in 2 families, 3 families, 4 through 8 families, and the big apartment complexes. They are going to see a massive increase in taxes as a result of this. And taxes are a cost of doing business for landlords. Those tax increases are going to get passed along in rent. So we need to do better on holding the line on spending and taxes in this city, so we're not adding to the burden of owning property that ends up in your rent check.
Okay. Well, you actually have time for a little bit, for one more question, hopefully. I thought that one would go a little longer. So Sue from Ward 1 asks, would you favor adding mental health workers trained in crisis intervention to calls that police make where a mental health issue is suspected? If so, how would you suggest that expense be covered?
I got to tell you, I'm not really sure what to do about that. I don't know if it makes sense to add a mental health worker, or whether or not it makes sense to give police some basic training in mental health so they know so they can call in somebody from the Greater Manchester Mental Health. I'll be honest with you, Sue. I don't know. I know that mental health issues are out there, obviously, but I don't know the best way to approach that. I haven't had a chance to really sort of study or look into it. So I'm not going to buffalo you and give you an answer.
Okay. That short one, I guess we have even more time. We have just over 5 minutes left. So
okay,
let's see what we can do here. Steve from Ward 8 asks, I've recently heard about school choice. What is that? Will it help or hurt Manchester schools? Is it feasible?
Well, I guess it all depends what you mean by school choice, because as I said at the top of the show, Steve, school choice is already taking place, and changes at the state level are going to give parents of low and moderate income children more and more choices. So rather than rehash what I said, I will just simply refer you to the beginning of the interview, unless, if you missed it, or send you to girardformayor.com, where you can get the details of the public school choice program that I have already proposed and explained during this interview.
Okay. And if we go slightly over 60 minutes, I'll let you finish your question. JR from Ward 1 asks, do you believe we should be giving all of these businesses tax breaks?
I don't really know what JR means by giving all of these businesses tax breaks, so I'll pass on that.
Okay, that's fine. Going on to the next one. Joe from Ward 3 says, we have our great tax cap law, and most politicians stand up and proudly say they will defend this law. Have any politicians analyzed that we just budget the projected tax cap numbers and stay within that?
Well, that's generally what seems to be happening, but I'll tell you, his name was Joe, right?
Joe from Ward 3.
Yeah, Joe from Ward 3. I'll tell you, Joe, I've got a lot of experience with city budgets. When I was the budget director for Mayor Wazorek, I actually assembled 3 city budgets. I proposed 2 as an alderman. I worked directly on 2 as chairman of the finance committee for the school board, and I, more on the periphery, participated in another 2 after Mayor Craig removed me from my chairmanship after she took office, though she left me on the committee. So here's what I'll say about the tax cap and the budget. The tax cap was put in because government doesn't have a competitive lever to become more efficient, effective, and responsive. It's not like the private sector, where if you're a company and you don't do your job well, there's somebody out there who's willing to do a better job and take your customer away from you. So the tax cap was meant to replace competition, right? Because it's not like, hey, the city of Manchester is not doing it for me. I think Hillsborough County will be who I use to pick up my trash, or provide my police services. That's not how it works. So the trick with the tax cap is not just to say, okay, well, here's the increase, and how can we keep doing things the way that we're doing them within that limited increase, which they've overridden a bunch of times, including Mayor Craig, who's been a part, I think, of every tax cap override since we've had the tax cap. But the trick is to find different and better ways of doing things, and frankly, to ask whether or not some of the things we're doing, we should be doing. That's what I will bring to the budget process as mayor. No one's going to have to teach me the budget process. I've run it. I know it. I know how I will run it as mayor because I've done it before. And the departments are going to be responding to me in the questions that I ask about what they're doing, whether or not it should be done, and how better to do it. And I actually explain this in greater detail at girardformayor.com. You can go to my my position on holding the line on spending and taxes. I will stand by the tax cap. I will not support an override of the tax cap, and I will drill down in every possible way I can think of to force departments, agencies that receive city funds that are not, they're not city agencies, they're outside agencies, whatever it is, they're going to show results, they're going to show improvement, or they're not going to get money, at least not, through me.
Okay, 2 minutes left, so this is the final question. John from Ward 6, I believe this question was also asked last night. What options...
So you're not letting me pick the question numbers now. But go
ahead.
You
wanted question 1.
Oh, it's still question 1?
Well, we're just doing it. We're doing question. It's a new question 1 every time.
Oh.
Because now there's fewer questions. So
I see. So you're just going from 1 to 2.
Well, yeah, just whatever
right.
The first one left in the list.
Gotcha. Okay.
So what options to address the current homeless situation in Manchester should be on the table, and what options should be off the table as we continue to address this issue?
I think we'll probably pick another one because I've already addressed the homeless thing.
That's fine. So the next one in line, East Side resident from Ward 6 asks, I see beggars with iPhones, imported cars, and decent homes. What are we doing to stop these people?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the panhandling thing in many ways is a scam. It's been explained to me that a lot of these people run corners the way pimps run prostitutes, and they're very territorial. And yeah, I've noticed they wear better clothes than I do sometimes, and it's kind of frightening. So there's definitely a scam element here. But the city passed, and this is important for you to know, the city passed an anti-panhandling ordinance. The ACLU took us to court, and they lost, and we lost. But the court in that decision told the city exactly what it needed to do to fix the ordinance so it could be enforceable. And it hasn't happened. So as mayor, I will take up that cause. The other thing that I will look at, and this is being done in other communities, is look at rebuilding the islands and the medians where they stand. I forget, I think it's Brockton, Massachusetts, might be Gloucester, I forget which one, but they're reconstructing them so they have all these uneven granite pieces and rocks and whatnot, and the panhandlers there, they can't physically stand or walk on them. One of them complained it was, quote, medieval. And so it's kind of put an end to it. So I think between maybe, changing up the surfaces that they're standing on or walking on and fixing the ordinance the way the court said the ordinance needed to be fixed in order to be enforced, those are two of the things that I will definitely look at. There's no reason for this panhandling, and I might have a talk with the police chief too, because I think they need to be doing some investigations on how this works. I've been told stories about how this all works and what a racket it really is, and I think there's a role for the police here to break up what could be actually a criminal enterprise.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today. Again, thank you for joining us, Rich. And just for everyone in the audience, we will be having another at-large aldermanic debate on September 8th at 6 p.m. with the candidates that we did not have last night. So please join us for that. And again, I'm Andrew Sylvia, the Assistant Editor of Manchester Inklink. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.